I was born on land that smelled like rain and wheat, where mornings began with the crow of roosters and ended under skies painted in orange and gold. My father used to say, "Lizzie, this soil remembers every footprint that ever loved it." I believed him, because even as a little girl, I could feel the heartbeat of our fields beneath my bare feet. That land wasn't just ours, it was us. Every furrow, every blade of grass held the stories of generations who had lived, loved, and died there. My mother's kitchen faced the east, so every morning sunlight would spill over the old wooden table, warming her face as she kneaded dough. I'd sit on the floor, watching her hands move, strong, wrinkled, yet gentle, while the smell of fresh bread and wild honey filled the room. My father would come in from the barn, his boots covered in dust, his laughter filling the air like music. We were poor, yes, but I never felt it. We had land, we had food, and above all, we had peace. I remember the first time I truly understood what pride meant. I was 12 when Father took me to the field to plant spring seeds. The sun was bright, and he said, "Lizzie, when you plant something with love, it always grows back, no matter who tries to take it away." I didn't understand then what he meant by take it away, but those words would follow me all my life, like a promise whispered by the wind. Our village was small, just a handful of families who all knew each other's laughter and sorrows. Sundays were for the church, and afterward, everyone would gather near the well, trading stories more than goods. I grew up listening to old voices telling tales of wars, droughts, and miracles. Every story had the same lesson. The land never betrays you, only people do. When I turned 18, life was simple, but full. My father grew weaker, and I began taking care of the farm alongside my younger brother Samuel. He was tall and restless, always dreaming of cities and machines. I, on the other hand, found peace in the rhythm of the land, the smell of hay, the softness of soil after rain, the quiet hum of life. But peace, I learned, is never permanent. The first signs of change came quietly, like a shadow slipping over the valley. A stranger came to our town, a man in a fine suit and hat, driving a shiny car none of us had ever seen before. He spoke with charm, his words smooth as butter, promising development, progress, and wealth for all. I remember watching from the porch as he shook hands with my father, his smile too practiced, his eyes too cold. My father didn't like him. He told me that night, "Men like that don't love the land. They love what it's worth." Within months, papers began circulating. Men from the city came with measuring tools and stamps, saying our land boundaries were unclear. They talked about permits, titles, and ownership records. Father, who could barely read, didn't understand any of it. None of us did. We only knew the land because we had lived on it our entire lives. Then one day, a man in uniform came to our door with a paper. It said our land was now under government evaluation. Father's hands shook as he held it. "Evaluation?" he said softly. "How can they evaluate my father's sweat?" Weeks turned into months of confusion. I watched my father grow thin, his laughter fading into silence. He would walk out at dawn and return only after sunset, dirt on his hands and worry in his eyes. Mother prayed harder every night, whispering to saints I'd never heard of. Samuel began spending more time in town, arguing with officials, coming home angry and defeated. Then the worst came. One evening, Father didn't return from the fields. We found him near the old oak tree, his body cold, his hand still clutching a piece of earth. The doctor said it was his heart. I knew it was heartbreak. We buried him on the hill overlooking the fields he loved. As the sun set, I whispered, "Don't worry, Papa. I'll protect it. I'll protect everything." But promises are heavy things, and the world is cruel to those who make them. After his death, the men came again, louder this time, more confident. They told us our land didn't belong to us anymore. They had papers, stamps, and signatures we'd never seen. We tried to fight, but what is a farmer's word against a businessman's document? The day they drove the first iron post into our field, I felt something inside me break. I could hear Mother crying behind me, her hands shaking as she held the wooden cross Father had carved years ago. Samuel shouted at them, but they pushed him aside like dust. I stood still. The wind blew through the wheat, carrying away the scent of our past. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked outside, barefoot, across the soil that was no longer ours. The stars looked the same, but they felt distant, as if even the sky had turned its face away. I knelt down and pressed my hand into the earth one last time. This is my home, and even if you take it, it will remember me. And for a moment, I swore I felt it answer, a heartbeat, faint but alive, beneath my trembling fingers. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning, that they would not only take our land and home, but even our name. Yet what they could never touch, no law, no paper, no power, was my soul. The morning they came for the house, the sky was strangely calm. Not a single cloud, just that pale, endless blue that feels like silence before a storm. I remember sitting on the front steps, holding a mug of tea that had long gone cold, while the sound of engines approached from the dirt road. Dust rose behind the trucks like ghosts rising from the earth. Mother stood by the door, her hands clutching the edge of her shawl, her eyes blank. Samuel was pacing near the barn, his anger a storm barely contained. "They can't do this," he kept saying. "It's ours. We were born here." But his words fell into the wind, useless against the steel and law that were coming for us. 3 men stepped out, 2 in suits, 1 in a uniform. They didn't even look around, didn't pause to feel the history in the air. One of them unfolded a stack of papers and began reading something about legal acquisition and compensatory relocation. The words felt cold, lifeless, meaningless. I stared at their lips moving but couldn't hear anything. My world had gone quiet, like a scream swallowed by the sky. Mother whispered, "Please, please, this is our home." The man in the uniform didn't meet her eyes. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job." They always say that, don't they? Just doing my job. When they walked past me to place a red mark on our door, a symbol that meant this no longer belongs to you, I felt something inside me twist and die. My father's laughter, my childhood memories, the smell of fresh bread and rain, all of it turned into echoes that no longer belonged to me. We had 3 days to leave. That's what the paper said. 3 days to say goodbye to a century of life. Samuel wanted to fight. He went to the town office, shouted at everyone, threatened to burn the papers. He came back with blood on his shirt and silence in his eyes. They had beaten him. He didn't tell us, but I saw the bruises when he tried to wash up. That night, I sat beside him in the dim candlelight. "It's over," I said softly. "We can't fight them anymore." He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. "Then what's left, Lizzie? If we don't fight, what are we?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. On the 3rd day, we packed what we could. A few clothes, my mother's rosary, father's photograph, and a small jar of soil from our land. Mother insisted on keeping it, so that wherever we go, home comes with us. I tied it with a piece of cloth and carried it close to my heart. When we left, I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because if I did, I'd never have the strength to move. But I heard the sound of the wind howling through the fields, as if the land itself was mourning us. We went to live with my mother's cousin in a small town a few miles away. Their house was cramped, the air thick with pity. People whispered when we passed by. Those are the ones who lost everything. In small towns, pity can be crueler than hatred. Mother fell ill soon after. She'd sit by the window for hours, staring at nothing. Some days she'd ask, "Did your father water the crops today?" I'd smile and nod, even though I knew she was lost in memories. Her body was there, but her soul stayed behind on that hill with my father. When she died that winter, the doctor said it was pneumonia, but I knew it wasn't. She died of heartbreak just like him. I buried her beside my father, under the same oak tree where we used to play as children. The new owners didn't want us there, but I begged. Just one more goodbye, I said. Maybe they saw the emptiness in my eyes because they let me. After that, there was nothing left to keep me there. Samuel left to find work in the city. He promised to send for me once he found a place. I never heard from him again. And so, for the first time in my life, I was completely alone. No land, no home, no family, not even a name that held weight anymore. People started calling me Liz, the homeless woman who sells herbs by the roadside. My father's proud name, Elizabeth Ward of Willow Hill Farm, had turned into that poor old woman who used to own something once. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake under the flickering light of the oil lamp, hearing the wind whistle through cracks in the wall. Every sound reminded me of what I'd lost. I'd close my eyes and see the fields, golden and endless, and I'd hear my father's voice saying, "They can take what they want, Lizzie, but never forget who you are." And maybe that's what kept me alive. Years passed that way, one long season blending into another. I worked in strangers' houses, washed their clothes, fed their children. They called me ma'am politely, but I saw the pity in their eyes. They didn't know I had once walked barefoot through my own fields, the sun kissing my face and the earth blessing my steps. Sometimes I'd walk by the road leading to our old land, just to see it from afar. It was fenced now, modern, cold, machines where our wheat once grew. They'd built houses, factories, and paved roads. No trace of the laughter, no trace of my family's sweat. But the hill with the oak tree was still there, though smaller, older. I'd stand there, hidden behind the trees, and whisper, "I'm still here, Papa. They took everything, but not me." Every time I said it, I felt a spark, small but real, burning inside my chest. The world could strip me of everything, but it couldn't take the one thing that mattered, the part of me that remembered love, earth, and dignity. I was a woman without land, without name, but my soul still walked barefoot through the fields of my memory. And somehow, that was enough to keep me breathing. The years after losing everything blurred together like watercolor on paper, colors running, fading, bleeding into one another until I could no longer tell one season from the next. Poverty has a strange rhythm. It doesn't roar, it hums. Every day feels the same. Every night echoes the one before. I lived in a small room at the edge of town, above a bakery that smelled of birch sugar and stale bread. The rent was low because the walls were cracked, and the ceiling leaked when it rained. But it was mine, at least for now. I earned a few coins washing clothes for families who didn't remember my name. They'd hand me piles of linen, smile politely, and say, "Thank you, ma'am," as if I were invisible. Sometimes when I'd scrub those white sheets under cold water, I'd think about the hands that once worked real soil, not soap and cloth. My father's hands, my mother's, my own. And then sometimes tears would mix with the rinse water, but I never cried loud. I learned to weep quietly, like the rain on an empty roof. One day, when I was out selling wild herbs near the market, I met a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8. Her dress was torn, her hair messy, her eyes too sad for her age. She stopped at my basket and stared at the tiny bunches of lavender I'd tied with string. "You smell like the fields," she said softly. It startled me. No one had said something like that in years. I smiled faintly and asked, "Do you like lavender?" She nodded. "My mama used to put it under my pillow. She's gone now." I don't know why, but I untied one small bunch and handed it to her. I said, "Keep it, for your dreams." She smiled, shy and grateful, and ran off. I thought that was the end of it, just another face passing through my long, quiet days. But the next morning, she came back with a loaf of bread wrapped in a handkerchief. "My papa bakes these. He told me to give you one." And just like that, something small and tender began to grow again inside me, a reminder that kindness still existed, even in a world that had taken so much. Her father's name was Daniel. He owned a small bakery, the same one beneath my room. I'd seen him a few times, but never spoken to him properly. He was a quiet man, always working before dawn and closing after sunset. When he found out I was the one helping his daughter with herbs, he came to thank me himself. "You've been good to Lily," he said one morning, wiping flour from his hands. "If you ever need anything, you let me know." I told him I needed nothing. I'd long stopped asking the world for favors. But he insisted I take leftover bread every evening. "It's just going to waste otherwise," he said. I knew it wasn't true, but I let him believe I did. In time, his kindness became my only warmth. We'd share tea on cold nights, talk about small things, the weather, the cost of flour, the way children grow too fast. He never asked about my past, and I never offered it. There was peace in silence, and we both understood that. Lily, though, asked questions. Children always do. "Where's your family, Miss Elizabeth?" she'd ask, sitting cross-legged on the floor as I mended clothes. "They live far away," I'd say. "Do you miss them?" "Every day." She'd nod, as if she understood, and then show me a drawing she'd made, usually flowers, sometimes the sun, sometimes me standing beside her, holding a lavender bunch. And each time, I'd feel something shift inside me, the quiet ache of remembering what love feels like. Seasons turned again. Winter came harsh and heavy that year. The bakery struggled. Flour prices rose and customers grew fewer. One night, Daniel fell ill. The doctor said it was his lungs. I took care of him as best I could, boiling herbs, sitting by his bed while Lily slept. He'd cough and wheeze, but still tried to joke. "Funny," he said once. "You came into my life when everything was falling apart, and somehow things started to make sense." I smiled, but didn't answer. Sometimes the heart understands things that words would only ruin. When spring finally came, Daniel recovered slowly. The bakery reopened, and Lily laughed again. I stayed on, helping more, kneading dough, sweeping floors, singing old songs to fill the silence. People in town began to notice. "That old woman from the farm, she's smiling again." I didn't care what they said. For the first time in years, I felt useful, alive. Then one afternoon, as I was tending to a small patch of flowers outside the bakery, a man in a black car stopped by. He wore a fine suit, polished shoes, the kind that don't know dirt. He looked familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. He said, "Mrs. Ward?" It had been years since anyone had called me that. My throat went dry. "Who's asking?" He handed me a folder. "I work with the county records office. We've been reviewing old land disputes. There's a matter regarding your family's property, the one from Willow Hill Farm." The world seemed to stop. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. He explained something about new ownership claims, errors in paperwork, backdated deeds. I couldn't follow half of it. All I understood was this: the land was being reconsidered for rightful ownership. There was a chance, however small, that it could be restored. When he left, I stood there frozen, holding that folder as if it were a living thing. I opened it, saw maps, stamps, and my father's name, faded but still there. That night I couldn't sleep. The past had come knocking after all these years. I sat by the window, staring at the moon, whispering, "Father, is this what you meant, that love always grows back?" I didn't know what the papers truly meant, whether justice or another disappointment. But I knew one thing for sure: I was no longer the broken woman who had left that land years ago. I had survived, learned, endured. I was still here, body and soul. Maybe they could still take what belonged to me. Maybe the law would still twist and turn against me. But for the first time in decades, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready, not to fight for land, but to stand again as Elizabeth Ward, daughter of Willow Hill. Because no matter how much the world had taken, it had never managed to take the one thing that truly mattered: my soul. I returned to my homeland many years later, with silver hair and trembling hands that carried more memories than strength. The road had changed. The trees were fewer, and the hills no longer echoed the songs of my childhood. But as I walked along the cracked path, the earth still remembered me. I could feel it under my feet, warm, alive, whispering my name through the wind. Where our house once stood was now a stretch of dry soil and faded stones. The oak tree, though, scarred by time, still stood tall. I reached out and placed my palm against its rough bark, and tears filled my eyes. I thought I'd feel anger, but all I felt was peace. Life had taken much, but it had also given me something unbreakable: the power to forgive. I sat beneath that oak tree until the sun began to sink, painting the sky in colors that only the old and the broken can understand. I thought of my parents, of my brothers, of Daniel, all gone, yet all here somehow, alive in the soil, in the wind, in me. I realized then that my name was never lost. My home was never just the house. It was my soul, and that no one could ever take. When I rose to leave, I smiled, not because I was free from pain, but because I had learned to walk with it. The world could steal my land, my home, even the name written on old papers, but not my soul. My soul belonged to the earth, to love, and to time itself. And as the last light of day touched the horizon, I whispered to the land that raised me, I never left you. I only learned to live without you.